Now appearing on center stage, it's Coco.
Wow, guy. First of all,
Come on, what is with this pick today?
Her name is Cinnamon. What is with this pick? This is like the opposite of strip club music. All right, guy?
It's close enough.
This is some of the most well-respected, critically acclaimed French EDM that ever existed. Daft Punk, who recently called it quits. The Robots, they never appeared in public without their robot masks on. Yeah, Daft Punk. And Rolling Stone magazine just put out their top 500 songs of all time, and they've radically changed it from the 2003 version. Number 500 was Kanye West's Stronger, which the only reason that song is worth its weight in salt is because it sampled a Daft Punk song, which made me think of that. Coco. Has there really been a stripper named Coco in the last 25 years?
Yes. Well, maybe. It's been 25 years since I've been to a strip bar.
Okay. That's Sean Bernard. I'm Brian Oak. It is the Brian Oak Show, episode 187. Is that possible? Is that real?
187. Isn't that the police thing for the sign for killing?
Yeah, no, Jesus. You are in a mood today,
I am.
man.
I've been running around doing bank stuff all day.
I can tell you're closing on a house tomorrow, aren't you?
Oh, I'm so fried. And my wife, like your wife, is a teacher. She's like, well, you're going to have to do all the banks.
I'm really busy right now. I'm back to school with kids now, so I'm going to need you to do it.
Children to speak English from other countries.
No, you've got an edge today, and I kind of like it, actually. It's a little chaotic, but I also kind of like it when Sean comes in hot. It is the Brian Oak Show, and it's powered by Smart Start MN. Here we are in the Smart Start MN studios in beautiful South Minneapolis, near the corner of 48th and Chicago. Hey, there was a murder last summer, just a mere 10 blocks from here. It's kind of defined a lot of what's going on in the world, and I believe it was the flashpoint that has helped define a lot of what's happening in that Rolling Stone Top 500, because the top changed. When they did it back in 2003, shockingly, the magazine called Rolling Stone, called the number one rock and roll song of all time, Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan. See what they did there?
Yeah.
Because Rolling Stone, Yeah. Well, now they've changed things rather dramatically, and I think it's actually a good thing, right? I mean, these lists are pointless, right? They genuinely are pointless. But, you put Fight the Power by Public Enemy at number 2. You put Aretha Franklin's cover of Otis Redding's Respect at number 1. I mean, it's reflective of the fact that things have changed. Times have changed. And so I do like that they are paying attention to the world. Historically, Rolling Stone has always been, back in the 70s and 80s, probably some of the most smart and interesting and I don't know, progressive political journalism that happened anywhere in the United States.
Oh, absolutely. And the articles in there were fantastic. I mean, they still are. They're not quite as edgy, I'd say, as they maybe once were.
Right.
They've softened a little bit, but maybe the world is not as edgy as it once was.
Or in some ways much edgier. And again, these lists, they can't possibly be definitive. There's no such word as best or greatest when it comes to artistic appreciation. We all like our own thing. I went through the list at length earlier today, and there were parts that filled my heart with joy, and there were parts that made me ragey as F. But before we get to that part right there, I do want to mention Smart Start MN. They are our primary sponsor. Without them, we are literally nothing. We are certainly not 187 episodes into doing the Brian Oak Show. Smart Start MN, Minnesota's original ignition interlock company. What is ignition interlock? Well, if you drink and drive, you're going to lose your license. The end. Even before you're found guilty, you will not be able to drive. You want to get back in that car. You want to be able to drive, but this time maybe you'll be a little smarter, because a night in jail, that does a lot to cool your jets, doesn't it?
It does. It reminds me of the movie I saw last night.
What'd you see?
Absence of Malice. Paul Newman, Sally Field.
Don't think I've ever seen it.
He is guilty before he's proven innocent, according to the newspaper. So the same thing happens with that. But
and did he make use of Smart Start MN?
Well, no, but I'm getting there. Just give me like another 45 to 50 minutes,
and
I should be able to. No, instead, go to smartstartmn.com/The Brian Oak Show. That'll get you 20% off the installation of the ignition interlock system.
It basically lets you drive if you've been busted for a DUI. Yeah. You can get back in your car. You can get back to some semblance of a normal life. Will you still have to make court dates? Will you still have to pay fines? Of course you will. But being able to drive makes all those things so much easier. They also make it possible for this to exist. So before we get to today's guest, who we'll talk about coming up very shortly, when you talk about the 500 greatest songs of all time, It's hard to take issue with any of the songs that are on the list. Now, where they are on the list, should this song be above this song? Should this song be... I mean, that's different for literally every single person alive. If we all sat down, every single person listening right now, and wrote down 500 songs, not one of those lists would match up. Not one. But there are certain artists where you're like, literally not one song in the top 500? Fuck you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And one of my all-time favorites, she's from Detroit. She is an American, but the only place she ever got any traction, any real love, was over in the UK until she became known as Leather Tuscadero on Happy Days.
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorites, Susie Quattro on The Brian Oak Show. Now, when I said the F-bomb earlier, I wasn't trying to be egregious. I was not trying to be a shock jock, even though it's well within my purview. But when I see a couple of songs from Joan Jett on the top 500 songs of all time, certainly much more popular than Susie Quattro ever was here in the States, without Susie Quattro, Joan Jett is not what Joan Jett is. Now, certainly the Runaways mattered, and they were important, and Joan Jett would have been a thing. Suzi Quatro set the mold for that jumpsuit-wearing, badass, F you, I'm every bit as sexy, and I'll take whatever I want female as the guys were back in the day. There wasn't a thing, and she was young and she was brash, but she was also really good, and she was teamed up with that Chapman Chin production duo that did all the songs by Sweet and Cheap Trick and The Knack and Blondie. I'm such a gigantic mega fan of Suzi Quatro. Not to be a cool guy, but just because Suzi Quatro freaking rules. It's the Brian Oak Show. Hi, I'm Brian Oak. That's Sean Bernard. Sean, you doing all right?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
How about you?
Well, I actually am doing okay. I'm tired as hell today. I slept poorly last night, but other than that, I'm fine. I'm asking you because you're trying to put on a brave face, but I know that you're closing on a house tomorrow. And I know what that does to the individual from the civilian side, but you've got the perspective of not only doing it as a civilian, but also as an insider, as an actual enlisted man. You work for a realty firm. You do. I mean, you work for the 50th and France location of Edina Realty. And so what's it like being a realtor, but also still having to close on a house like a regular person?
Well, I'm not very bright, apparently, because I also have a client that's closing at the same time. And then I have 2 closings next week that were supposed to happen yesterday, but got pushed back a few days.
Super good idea.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, that's smart. And you forget that the mortgage people, and I love our mortgage people, but...
Oh, sure you do.
But you know what? What is with the day before having you dig up these documents that they could have probably known about a month before then?
What's that thing when you live in an old neighborhood? There's this stack of documents that has to do with the history of the house.
Like the abstract or the Torrens, or
maybe it's one of those two. But it's like
plat map.
But it literally goes back to the entire history of that piece of property since it was a piece of property.
It's really cool. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting from an historic perspective until you actually have to go through it and see how it's going to screw with your current mortgage situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, no, it's exciting. It's fun. Somebody said to me, a realtor should buy or sell a house every 5 years just so they know what their clients are going through.
Are you enjoying that right now?
I'm okay, actually, and I've, people that are kind of judging us because we had to do a couple of quick moves based on, a lot of different things, But I'm like, well, you're not the one who has to move. And I'm a big fan of the pre-move, which we did. I moved most of our stuff to our garage. So when I finally hired movers, first time in my life, but the movers are going to be able to pull right up to the garage, and actually about 90% of our stuff is already in that garage.
We should almost get a sponsor that has something to do with moving people to kind of piggyback on you sponsoring this, because asking your friends to move and help you move is over. That shit is over.
Yeah, we're too old for it.
It's not cool, man. The knees don't hold out. And they drop a box accidentally. Like back then, you owned what? Nothing. Everything was replaceable. Now, where we're at, stop asking people to move. Get someone to move you. It's the only way to go. Now, that's the guy who hasn't moved in 17 years saying that. But you've done the same thing. So you're right. You're doing okay.
I am. And if you know somebody who's looking to buy or sell, don't forget that I donate a portion of every buy or sell to a local artist or musician. I won't go into all of it right now, but my Aunt Alexis, we are selling her place next week, and she's donating. She said, you know what? I'm actually going to go a little out of the norm. I want to donate my money to Jazz 88. My friend Patty Peterson works over there. She's just a big believer in supporting them, so I'm going to donate to Jazz 88 for them. And I'm donating, in our situation for my house that I'm buying, I'm donating to my friend Steve Kramer. He's a musician over at our church, very progressive church over here in South Minneapolis, who has cancer. He is doing incredibly well after about 10 months of cancer, but I'm donating to him. If you know somebody that's looking to buy or sell, 612-859-2594. That number is textable, Peter.
All right, then.
How are you, Peter?
All righty, then.
Peter Bourne is our guest today. Peter, I don't even really know where to start, because we all, the three of us, kind of go back to a similar genesis point. Like, we all started from somewhere else,
right,
but we all cross paths back, I don't know, good God, more than 25 years ago. At least we all sort of went through that same intersection within a relatively short period of time. So, Peter, before we talk about your life as a music producer, as a musician, as a radio guy, as the many things you've done, where are you from?
I'm from Southwest Minneapolis. Grew up, born and raised.
Born and raised South Minneapolis guy.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So you're growing up. Where do you go, if you don't mind me asking? Where do you go to school? Or maybe even more importantly, I don't really care where you went to school, if I'm honest. I want to know how you fell in love, because radio and music are, Sean and I, that's our lot in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're a couple of weirdos, a couple of old nerds. But at some point, you fall in love with it, right? At some point, it becomes your thing, whether you're listening to it as a kid. When do you get the itch that maybe radio is something I'm going to be involved with?
It started, my father was in radio at KLTF, Little Falls radio station.
Oh.
And so he had apple crates from Little Falls, whatever that would be, chocked full of 45s.
Nice.
Oh, don't
Does
you
he
wish
still
you had
have them?
Well, you would wish. Actually, the Wax Museum purchased about 200 of them from me when I was trying to buy my first 10-speed bike.
Right? You're like, we can get rid of these, whatever.
Well, my dad goes, but first, make sure you dub them down to cassette.
Did you really dub all of them to cassette?
Well, I'd pick my favorites, yeah. So you get everything from the Chordettes to Ricky Nelson, whatever.
He didn't care, because, they were coming in like an overflow, right? Like, he had more than he knew what to do with.
Right.
So he's like, you can take these and sell them, but make sure you get the ones you want to have before it goes on.
Yeah, Snoopy and the Red Baron has to go on my...
Got it.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with a lot of that, I guess we'll call it AM, from the 60s era.
Yeah, love it.
So that was kind of formulated in my DNA early on. And then he was actually recording, had recording gear from that era that he used to record people's weddings. He would go in and record people's weddings, and then they would press a vinyl, and they would get their album, their album of their wedding, an audio album. So
of their music, of the entire
start to finish,
so they'd get
15 minutes aside.
But they'd get the ceremony and the whole bit on an actual pressed album.
Yeah,
really.
So I was a little kid running mic cables and hooking up mics and hiding them in places so that they wouldn't be seen and they could be recorded. And I was introduced to a lot of things through the music and then recording, all at a young age before 12.
So, okay, you're a kid at that point. Like, you're not even a teenager. You're not even a young adult. You're a kid.
Yeah.
Did you resent it, or did you enjoy the sort of excitement of being part of ceremonies like that?
Well, it got a little boring depending on the denomination. But this is also the era. Keep in mind when they had live bands in the balcony.
Yeah.
Playing the backgrounds. It might be Paul Stuckey, or it might be whatever, You Are the Sunshine of My Life.
Yeah.
All these, they had live bands playing at the service. So it was kind of that hippy-dippy 70s era.
Right on.
The band called Spirit was there rocking it.
Whoa. Like Spirit, like...
No, different Spirit. I don't think they'd looked it up.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be great?
They probably just weren't big enough to get noticed by the actual Spirit, who later would go into litigation with Led Zeppelin. I just wondered if it was that Spirit. But it was a church.
They were. Yeah, I threw it out.
I got you.
Yeah.
So... everybody was mic'd up? Like the wedding party was mic'd up and you could actually hear what they were saying?
Usually there was a mic close by, like on the altar.
Did you ever have the Old School moment? Remember the movie Old School? When
okay.
Vince Vaughn goes, one vagina the rest of your life, real smart. Did that get pressed on the vinyl?
Unbelievable. Here we are talking about one of the most sacred and wondrous moments of two young people's lives together.
Yeah.
But seriously,
but Sean's on fire.
Why?
It's just that kind of a day.
Man. No, this guy's been filling out paperwork at financial institutions all day.
It's just good to see people.
All right, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter, when's the very first time you, as a young, wide-eyed, idealistic individual, step foot in a radio station and realize you're going to fucking do something? Or with music, either one. Which one came first? Did you start working with music or radio first?
Actually, it was radio first. Because of my dad's background, and he said, hey, you know what? They're doing this thing at college radio at KUOM, and they're doing this thing called Radio of the Theater. And so we went to spend an afternoon, my buddy and I, and we wrote a radio show. It was like a radio drama, and we got selected.
Cool.
Like Vincent Price Theater.
In my case, it was.
love it.
In my case, it was a direct ripoff of Batman and Robin. We called it the Black Phantom, and named after a bike.
Nice.
Right.
And so we did this whole thing. We took the vacuum cleaner and we stopped it and reversed the sound of it so it sounded like a turbo. I mean, all this kind of stuff. This is a 12.
See, I remember. I mean, that was fun, man. I remember doing that kind of stuff when I was a kid. But at home with like the little press play and record, recorders and doing that kind of. I didn't have access to a radio station, but that was the stuff that was amazing.
Yeah. So that was early on in my formulation of that, and music was always a part of that. But it wasn't until I hit about, I guess, 15 years old where I triggered into music. And it'll lead into our next song if you wanted to try that.
Let's go ahead and do that. What do you want? I mean, so this is your first song. I don't think there's anyone alive who hasn't heard this song before. But what's more important to me than the legacy of a song, the origin of a song, is why it matters to a guest that's on this podcast. Why'd you pick this one?
Well, love it or hate it. I actually love it because
I got nothing against it.
It was a pivotal song in my life because I was over in England with a theater company from the Washburn area, Washburn High School.
Yeah.
I feel like we missed a pretty big step right there. I don't want to spend 20 minutes on it, but I mean, like, so you go from Southwest suburbs guy, making fun radio plays at your dad's radio station. How did you get to England as part of a theater company?
So making radio drama fun.
Yeah.
And then coming up through high school, or coming up through junior high, actually, I found that I really enjoyed acting.
Yeah.
And so I did some acting, and I was doing some singing in choir. I was brought in by a girl who said, you should come and join our theater company. It was at Fuller Young People's Theater. Hi, Steve, and the rest of the crew. Back in the day, so I was 14, 15 years old, and they needed somebody to run sound for their production. And then, of course, eventually I became, involved in acting in some of their productions as well. So here we are at this Minneapolis Park Board doing this thing, and then we get the call that, oh, by the way, we've been invited to London to perform for a month.
Man.
In 1982. We may have been able to make all the dates, except some of our dates were shut down because of IRA bombings.
Well, that's that. There is that.
But 1982 also happened to time in with an album that was being released by the band Journey. And so we're over in England performing. While we're doing this performance, we had a month and a half of 50 people in a youth hostel. Well, what do you do when you have downtime? Well, they happen to have this parlor room in the building that had what I thought was kind of a junky old piano because it only had 2 pedals. I didn't realize that Bosendorfer meant anything, but it was a Bosendorfer 9-foot concert grand.
Wow. And
so I had my Sony Walkman, my headphones, and I had some downtime. So I'm plunking away at this new album called Escape. And I'm learning this piano thing by ear. And so I have this now. So now I've got this learned. I mean, keep in mind that this is the era of Come On Eileen, Haircut 100.
I'm deeply familiar with 1982, my good
Yes.
I loved
Tainted Love by Soft Cell. I had all that when that's where I was experiencing over in England at the time.
Right.
But here I am with this track, and I'm learning how to play this song. I get back after we're done to the States, and I thought this is a definite guarantee to get some girls excited with the fact that I can play this track. So
it's a powerful motivator.
So I'm doing this, and just so happens I'm at this conference or this retreat, and a friend of mine who's much older, he was like maybe 6 years older than I was. He goes, "You know that song? Well, you got to be in our band. I got a gig for us." I'm like, "Dude, I'm 15 years old. You got to make sure what kind of gig? What's on the Strip at 494, and we're going to do this house gig, and I think you should play the piano for our band." I'm like, "Okay." I literally had just learned this track. So what that was an entry point for me to playing music, granted covered tunes at that point, professionally. So at 15 years old, I'm rocking the house 4 nights a week at the Mandarin Yen on 494 and Penn Avenue. And here's the song.
Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere. Just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. He took the midnight train going anywhere. A singer in a smoky room, the smell of wine and cheap perfume. For a smile they can share the night. It goes on and on and on and on. Strangers waiting up and down the boulevard, their shadows searching in the night. Streetlights, people living just to find emotion, hiding somewhere in the working hard to get my fill. Everybody wants a thrill. Paying anything to roll the dice just one more time. Some will win, some will lose. Some are born to sing the blues. Oh, the movie never ends. It goes on and on and on and on. Strangers waiting up and down the boulevard, their shadows searching in the night. Streetlights, people living just to find emotion, hiding somewhere in the Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling. Streetlight people. Don't stop believing. Hold on. Streetlight people. Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling.
I mean, it doesn't really get more iconic than that. And at the time, I think about that record, Escape, and it was the first time, granted, it was probably at a middle school dance where you're supposed to be leaving room for Jesus between your two bodies.
Oh, yeah.
But the first time ever at a dance where I held a girl that close and felt her entire body next to mine. And when you're a young, pre-pubescent man, boy, you feel strange stirrings.
My pants are getting tight.
Oh, dear God.
What's happening?
It's hard for me to imagine. I think about, and I know life changes and it's different for everybody, but there's also sort of universal streams that run through everything. I know it's harder for women and for young girls, but man, it's not a simple road to hoe, if you will, for young men either. Before we go any further with Peter Bourne, I do need to mention that Palmer's Bar is an important sponsor, a latest sponsor for the Brian Oak Show. And they've got some very cool stuff on the not too distant horizon. A good example, September 19th, this coming Sunday, they are going to have Miss Mira and the Moonshiners, as well as Jerry O. Parker II, leading J-Train Jazz. This is kind of old-fashioned jazz and blues done right. A couple of amazing people. They do it every third Sunday at Palmer's. It's just one example of the fact that on that bar out there, while the weather is still agreeable, in fact, this Sunday is supposed to be nice, like sunny and 82. It's supposed to be perfect out there. Another opportunity to get out and see some live music, support a really important business on the West Bank of South Minneapolis. Tony, the entire crew over there, they do a great job not only booking music, but of taking care of their clients and their dear friends. And I don't know, I mean, this whole podcast for, my God, coming up on 200 episodes has been about explaining, exploring, and researching and, doing what we can for this community, because you and I are we're part of this community. This is our home, man.
Yeah, when I was out of town doing a little gig of my own, I had a guy go, where are you from? I said, Minneapolis. He goes, yeah, but where? I'm like, what suburb? I said, no, I live in Minneapolis. He goes, oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, well, actually, I'm one of these people who believes that you stick with it. And the only way that these businesses survive is if we patronize them, if we show up and go to the shows. And I said, he's like, well, let's dump more money into Minneapolis. I said, it's not just money. It's things like mentoring and helping people help themselves and that sort of thing. But I said, where do you live? And he's like, well, I just moved to Egan.
And there's nothing wrong with Egan.
No, there's nothing wrong with Egan, but it's like...
But I mean, like, saying like, well, you're from Minneapolis. Yeah, but where? Like Coon Rapids? Like, no. You live in Minneapolis. And again, I'm not trying to be snooty at all.
No.
But I mean, if we don't, as we learned over the course of the pandemic, which, by the way, we're not all the way out of, but we're doing well, but it could be better. We've already lost so many important places,
yes.
And not just bars, not just restaurants, venues and all kinds of incredible places. We're trying to hang on to them. We're trying to do what we can to support the things that make this city the thing that this city is, and these cities that surround us, the entire area. I love it here. You love it here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big
Peter
part.
loves it here.
Exactly. But it's a big part of what we do. And so we'll never stop doing that. So palmersbar.net. What I told you about this Sunday, just one example of the things they do. They do that every third Sunday. You can go there and hear some of the most savage, mind-bending, face-melting punk rock you've ever heard in your life. But then you could show up on Sunday and hear some of the coolest, mellowest, sweet, soothing jazz on a Sunday afternoon, evening that you've ever heard. It's one of the very cool things about Palmer's Bar. Again, palmersbar.net. So, Peter, you are, at some point you learn to play piano, because if you're playing piano while you're at a hostel in London and you learn to play Journey, at some point you pick up music. Now music the thing. Did you get into bands after that?
Yeah, so I did this cover band thing for a while.
What was the name of your band?
That was a band. You can find us on out there in the ether. It's called the Argyles. So we all had the sweaters. I mean, it was right patterned, right that.
I'm not against it. I always, anytime anybody's ever played music, I ask them the name, because the early bands always have corny names, and they always have one or two embarrassing covers that, like, there's some that you look back and you're like, we killed that. But then there's some where you look back and you're like, what the hell were we thinking playing that song?
Like the Curly Shuffle. Right?
Ouch.
Ouch. That was hey Mo, hey Mo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember.
But that was usually right after that was right after the King of Pain, so
right.
we played,
oh, nice.
So we would go there and we'd play the B-sides of the Romantics, like I'm Hip by the Romantics.
Yeah.
And so that was that era, and that was really good. It was a good teaching ground. Plus, I got to realize that when I went off and had my egg roll at the Mandarin Yen during break, and I was playing video games, and the rest of the guys came back from break, and the tempo was extremely fast as they started, and they were kind of sweaty and wiping their face. I was like, oh, okay. Now, so it was a big learning curve for me.
You're playing Miss Pac-Man, and they are helping to protect the gross national product of Bolivia. Is what's happening right there. I understand.
There was that era.
It was the early 80s, man.
It was the time.
To each their own. So you're moving along, but at some point you start writing jingles and you start getting involved with radio. How does that come about?
Well, let me step it back just a second. Before that, original music actually entered into the vein. It was a band called Waiting for One, and we were a Minneapolis power trio. Sean Mack and Johnny C. and I formed a band, and we started writing original music, and that led me to a lot of the nightlife. So we played pretty much all the rooms of the time. So we would play upstairs at Graffiti's.
Wow.
We played the Entry a number of times.
Yeah.
Larry Sahegi had us booked at the Caboose for Tuesday night spaghetti night.
Well, now he's like deeply immersed over at the Driftwood, where my wife plays a lot. But the fact that I saw him as the frontman for Urban Gorillas back in the day, and now that I just see him on the regular as sort of a civilian or behind the scenes guy, still blows my mind.
It's interesting. He's a guy I want to talk to and spend some time to understand what happened in his journey. He'd be a great guy to have on this show.
Oh yeah, it's on the list. There's a large list.
So Larry actually kicked me out of the Caboose. Get out of my bar.
What did you do?
So we are coming to the pinnacle of the show. This is the point where every guy looks and goes, we are the best effing rock and roll band in the world.
Of course you are.
We're having this moment, and we have all 25 people watching us going, yes! but Tina Schlesky and the B-sides were following us.
Oh my
And
gosh.
apparently the time clock stopped at this point, and Larry goes. Larry comes up to us, and I'm like, we're raging, having the greatest time.
Yeah.
And he comes up and he does that, draws across the neck, like stop. I'm like, I yell, we're almost done. He goes. So I proceed to pull the Johnny Cash finger on him.
Oh no!
Ooh.
And said, and next thing you know, the power goes off.
Yeah, yeah,
He just kills it.
And so we didn't get to climax musically with that moment, but we got to the point where he goes, get out of my bar.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had to leave, and the rest of the guys hoisted my bass rig. I was playing bass over the back fence with guitar chords. I mean, this is legendary in my world.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah.
But we found common ground after that. He said I may have been a little bit zealous or anxious, and
Well, there was a lot of that in the 80s, right?
Yeah, right. So, but that was a great era because that actually taught me songwriting, taught me how to kind of compose, and one of my influences at that point was Joe Jackson. Is She Really Going Out With Him was like the hit. That happened.
It's a great song.
But going deeper, he actually did everything. He did, swing stuff.
Yep.
He had that era. And then he expanded beyond that. He did all kinds of styles. And I thought, wow, this is a guy worth listening to. He's not one-dimensional. So I gleaned a lot of that off of him.
Well, he's got a series of like 4 or 5, maybe 6 records that I think are all bulletproof, and he really does go all over the map. Some of it sort of modern jazz, some of it straightforward rock and roll, some of it pub rock, some of it very cool, almost new wavy type stuff.
Yep.
And there was really not anybody else quite like him.
No, and I was introduced, actually Ken Chastain. He had a band called The Answers back in the day, and Ken and his brothers and all that, they had a thing, and they played a lot of Joe Jackson. I was like, that's the kind of stuff I want to do. So that's why I wrote with my trio of guys, and we had a lot of fun during that era. So that was really kind of a pivotal time where I learned music. I gleaned what I wanted to or could at that point, and then I'm coming to the age where it's like, oh, you got to get a job after traveling in a white panel van and paying for pizza. And that was dinner for a week, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, back in those days, you could share an apartment building or a house with 3, 4, 5 guys for $150 a month. But then eventually at some point, you're like, shit, I have to actually act at least vaguely like an adult.
Well,
and it changes.
I got married young, so I got married at 21 years old.
Wow.
My wife and I knew each other all through this time, so she supported all of that. But yeah, 21 years old.
Okay, before we hear the song, you have to tell the story of what happened on your wedding day.
Well, it was the previous day. So I was at KQRS working, and this is before cell phones, so
This
I can't
is
blame
one of my favorite stories. My wife cried. She laughed so hard.
I don't know about that. But so I took a break for lunch, went to the Sunray Shopping Center where they had a haircutting place there.
I'm familiar with Sunray.
Proceeded to get all the hairs trimmed, and I'm looking sharp.
Yeah, you are.
By the way, if you're going to get married, give yourself a couple of days so you don't have that super fresh cut.
There's that.
But okay, so I had a fresh cut going, and I'm on my way back to the radio ranch, and I'm driving along Golden Valley Road towards past the golf course area, and then Schuler's.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm driving that route, and I'm just singing in my head, I'm getting married in them, whatever it might have been.
Ding dong, the bells are gonna chime. Yeah, I got it.
So I'm totally in my own head here, and I'm driving, and this is now December 29th of 1989, and there's a little ice on the road. And so coming off of Highway 55, there's a turn that people coming westbound can kind of turn all across, and they cross over. You got to stop if you're going eastbound and let them pass. Well, I was totally not thinking about it. I saw this nice Cadillac come across. I'm like, and I hit the brakes and slid right into this guy. T-boned him. Nice big old Cadillac. I'm driving Dad's 77 Bonneville, right?
Of course you are, right?
Another piece of lead.
So you're putting a real piece of meat into another piece of meat.
Yeah. Well, this guy wasn't belted in. He slid across the seat, and I'm watching in slow-mo as he's going off into the gully, but then over a retaining wall down into the business. Just down that way. So he's literally done a jump down into the parking lot, like a 6-foot drop. Now,
he's still in his car, right? You didn't kick him out of his car.
No. He's still in the car.
Okay, all right.
And I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I kill him? I'm now completely in shock. So what did I do? Here's where Sean and I follow him over the wall.
takes his car and drives over the wall. Like, goodbye, cruel world.
Like intentionally.
I just thought, what's the quickest way to get to him? And I said, I got to go over the wall. And so I Bo and Luke duked it over the wall and land. At this point, he's probably thinking, he's coming to finish me. He's going to finish me off.
The guy's coming to kill me. So, how was the call to your insurance company to explain this whole thing? That's what I want to know.
Is there a term limits? Because here's the deal. I didn't get word one.
Oh, my God.
No, I don't know.
That's crazy.
So no one ever contacted you? No one ever said you owe us $12,000? Nothing.
Lord, I love that story.
Well, the guy was not belted. Not that made a difference. He was okay, but shooken. He was a doctor of all things.
Oh. Was his car effed up?
His front end got kind of screwed up.
All right.
My front end, once again, the bumper going like this. That was about it.
Ah, the good old days. The good old days.
So I called my dad. I said, I had an accident, but the car looks pretty good. And the other guy, I'm assuming he's going to call. Nothing ever happened of it. It never came back to me. I didn't get my dad didn't get it. At least if it did, he was cool about it and didn't say a word to me about it. Because at the end of the day.
That's what happened, Peter.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
We got to believe the insurance was called.
It's hard for me to imagine that the guy would have just been like, that's cool. You pitched me over a wall and drove at me immediately afterwards. Yeah. I'm going to let this one go.
Well, stranger things happen.
Here we are. Lo, these many years later, here we are. Yeah. Why don't we go ahead and hear a little Joe Jackson?
With gorillas down my street. From my window I'm staring while my coffee goes cold. Look over there, there's a lady that I used to know. She's married now or engaged or something, so I'm told. Is she really going out with him? Is she really gonna take him home tonight? Is she really going out with him? 'Cause if my eyes don't deceive me, there's something going wrong around here. Tonight's the night when I go to all the parties down my street. I wash my hair and I kid myself, I look real smooth. Look over there, here comes Jeannie with her new boyfriend. They say the looks don't count for much, so there goes your proof. Is she really going out with him? Is she really gonna take him home tonight? Is she really going out with him? 'Cause if my eyes don't deceive me, there's something going wrong around here. Around here. But if looks could kill, there's a man there who's more down as dead. 'Cause I've had my fill. Listen, you take your hands from her head. I get so mean around this scene. Hey, hey, hey. Is she really going out with him? Is she really gonna take him home tonight? Is she really going out with him? 'Cause if my eyes don't deceive me, there's something going wrong around here. Around here. Something going wrong 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 around.
Best cold ending ever.
But again, all three of us have had plenty of experience in radio, and cold endings can suck.
I know. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah, or worse still is the false ending, where it sounds like it's ending. You're like, 107.1, the river, the valley's home for classic rock, and then there's something that you're like, fuck you. Even though you've heard the song 150 times, you can't seem to get your head around it. Before we resume our conversation with Peter Bourne, we are going to mention the fact that our latest sponsor, Forgotten Star Brewing, has a big event coming up this weekend. It is going to be 2 days of huge music in Fridley, Minnesota at this great brewery for Oktoberfest. Even though it's mid-September, can you please explain that to me, Sean?
I still don't understand it, but I know that it's going to be really fun. And apparently they just won some beer award, a friend of mine told me, which is really cool.
We're going to talk about that out there, exactly. They were at, I believe, a national, possibly international beer contest. It's certainly national. They were the only Minnesota brewery to win an award, and they won an award for one of their lagers.
So cool. So, yeah, they'll have bands out there Friday night, and then all day Saturday, all the way till midnight. We'll be there from 3 to 9. If you're a Patreon member, stop by and see us, because we have free beer tickets for Patreon members. Yes.
New information has come to light, man. I didn't know that.
My friend Andy texted me and said, yep, we'll give you some beer tickets for your Patreon members, so swing by and see us. And the first one is on us.
Well, great. I mean, and if you don't know what Sean looks like when you come over there, just go to his OnlyFans account. I mean, you'll recognize him in a heartbeat. And
nobody knows him on my OnlyFans account.
Okay, well, just trying to make you a little extra money.
Or just look for somebody whose head is almost as big as Brian Oak's.
Well, that's true. Both of us would be in the contest for prize-winning pumpkin at the county fair. Speaking of Forgotten Star, ForgottenStarBrewing.com. But on Friday, they've got Monica LaPlante, Jeremy Messersmith, and many more. On Saturday, when you and I are going to be there, Nathan Frazier, Al Church, Ready Freddy, Blue Hound, and many more. It's going to be a cool weekend. And the guys at Forgotten Star are really rock solid. We are so happy they decided to sign on. And I think they adopt the same philosophy that we have. I'm not speaking for them, and I don't want anyone to get mad at them, but I get the impression they're the same kind of guys who just refuse to work with assholes.
Yes,
right?
That's correct.
And we refuse to work with assholes. And so, I don't know, it always works out when you're like, hey, you seem cool. Hey, you seem cool. We should work together. Let's do that together. ForgottenStarBrewing.com if you want to know more. Peter Bourne, you are born and bred Minnesotan. You have done a lot of cool things, music as well. You did a lot of radio. Sean and I have done a lot of radio. I feel like we're going to have you back for a radio-specific episode because we don't have a ton of time left. But I also feel like that episode's going to require a lot of editing because we were all there at the end of sort of the exciting days of radio, like the last days of Pompeii sort of thing, right?
Right, absolutely.
I mean, there's the halcyon, glorious, legendary days of 50s and 60s AM, and then the emergence of FM in the 70s, and then the truly decadent days of the 80s. And while we all had a little taste of that, really the 90s, I think, is all of our bread and butter, right, for all of us. And so it wasn't quite as decadent as it was, but we all had a front row seat for some pretty sketchy shit. Do you think that's fair?
I think Sean's going to have to get his wax pen out and start editing the old tape.
Absolutely.
Cut it up with the razor.
My diagonal
taping
cut.
It back together.
Yeah, it's ready.
Oh, man. See, but that's the thing is we've all done this long enough that each one of us in this room has edited tape to play back on the air with the razor blade and with that little tape you put together. And wow.
It doesn't always stick, and you're like, God!
And you try to get it just right, and 95% of the time you get it, but every once in a while and there's nothing you can do because that shit is gone.
The double breath.
Before we let you go, the number one reason we had you in today, Peter, was Unlocked Mission. Tell me about Unlocked Mission. What is it?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Unlocked Mission is the next big thing that I have taken on as a kind of a legacy project. It ties in all my talents to this point. So it ties in my musical background. It ties in my production background, radio. There is actually another section of my life which was creating fun show cars. So making cars.
Rehabbing cars?
Well, we're going to have to, like I said, another show.
We'll have to have you back.
I'll give you one compound word, Batmobile.
Really?
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. And
the Batmobile?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I recreated a number of these for various museums.
Okay. All
but
right.
Ultimately, it gave me a skill set. And I found an opportunity to take and put all of these things onto a giant riverboat. So music, studio, writing and producing. And we've created a one-of-a-kind traveling riverboat. And it's going to start here in Minnesota. It's currently docked in Minnesota. But the goal is to take it down river. There's over 6,000 miles we can travel on the Mississippi and its tributaries and capture music. Find the singer-songwriter in that community. Capture the flavor of all these communities as we travel together. And then also, there's the nonprofit portion, which suggests that let's teach the youth how to play together as a band or create relationships and unite these people as we go up and down the river. And basically in our wake, we leave this catalog of great, fresh, brand new music that we will record, produce, and we have buy-in from people not only in the United States, but over in Europe as well, who said, I'd like to come and produce some of these things on this boat.
I mean, so this is wild. I mean, this is very overarching. I mean, we're talking a little bit of cultural field trip because the United States is a big place, and there are people on the northern end of the Mississippi who don't have the slightest effing idea what's happening further downriver and vice versa.
Yeah.
But we're also talking a little bit of School of Rock, getting kids involved. We're also talking about a little bit of Alan Lomax going out and taking field recordings of music that other people that otherwise would have literally vanished and finding people who do this thing. Where did the riverboat idea come from? I mean, have you built boats before? Have you done boats? Why did you decide that the riverboat was both figuratively and literally, why was it the vehicle to make this happen?
Well, I had experience producing in various locations. You can build a studio in an office space now, like we are here right now.
Right.
And so I had done some recording on a different buses, and I owned and we raised our family down in the city of town of Red Wing, where we had a boat. And one time I had to do an album mix. I said, I'm going to just take a week. I'm going to go down to the boat by myself and mix this product. Well, then I thought,
like a houseboat kind of thing?
It was more like a cruiser boat. So, it's like an RV. It was nothing fancy.
I got you.
But then I said, okay, who's done this before? Who's put a studio on a boat? Type in Google, and then it turns out that the Astoria is a barge studio owned by Dave Gilmour. So I'm like, okay.
Not David Gilmour.
David Gilmour.
Of Pink Floyd?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can look it up. And
I believe you. Wow.
So I'm like, okay, so somebody's done this before. I can find out more, and let's see who built the studio for David Gilmour. Nick Whitaker. His name popped up. So Nick and I emailed a few times. He goes, send me a picture of your boat. And so then he goes, yeah, you want to come over and visit? So my wife and I in 2019 went to London, and we got to hang out with not the man. The man wasn't there, but the whole studio boat thing was happening.
Well, so here's the thing that's worth mentioning is I am aware of David Gilmour's significant legacy, and also the fact that he would be working with someone who was an also-ran or someone who just did an okay job. I mean, you're dealing with a premier tech who knows precisely what he's doing.
Yeah, top cat. And so he agreed, and before we got done with our first meeting, he said, so as we work on our project kind of thing, and then, so we have him as one of our consultants and one of our design team for converting this boat and making the studio properly, a proper treatment. I mean, because you want to make it good, right? I mean, just like the studio we're in here, obviously not designed by David Gilmour's boat studio designer guy. Yeah.
But because of the nice people at AudioQuip, we have real equipment in here, so it sounds better than your average podcast.
Those guys.
We're able, they're great guys, but we're able to do this on a level that is a little above average of what happens. So I suppose you're at the point where you're like, if we're going to make a studio on a boat, let's make it a freaking good one.
Right. So he was the acoustician along with a local cat who joined forces. So Dave All is a drummer from a band, as we all know, the Suicide Commandos.
The name is familiar.
So Dave hooked up with Nick. We talked about design things, and so Dave spent some time and continues to spend time helping dial in that space and making it huge.
Fabulous. So now, in addition to, we're not talking about a one-time trip down the river, right? I mean, obviously, you've got longer-term plans for this, but I mean, so you're going to go down the river, you're going to chronicle, you're going to find people, you are going to what kind of things do you see happening? So you're talking about the nonprofit aspect of it, which is great.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you see musical releases? Do you see trips for people to come along on musical excursions? I mean, having that recording facility on a boat is fantastic. But what sort of long-term goals do you have planned for? I mean, because it's a pretty unique project, right? There's not a lot of this going on. What sort of ends do you see it going towards?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, we're looking at non-traditional ways to get the word out, and so creating some YouTube content. From my days as a TV producer, we can work with all the different kinds of elements to create actually better than average content. And so we'll not only do that, but then so we'll document that visually, but we'll also have albums worth of content that we're creating as we go along.
Right.
And so the combination is to see if we can't spread a lot of joy. Hence the name of the boat is Joyful Noise.
Mm-hmm.
And really just that's it. We want to unite communities through music. And then I think we're all on the same page. All of our wives are educators.
They are. Mine's a music educator.
And so my wife, being an educator, is also a person who can write programming. And so we're going to be doing a lot of good things. And we're still trying to determine how it's all going to play out.
Yeah.
But we've got some interest from some outstanding national artists, some people which I'm going to hold back on saying. But at this point, we've got lots of people here in Minneapolis which have really stepped up too. So Matt Fink from The Revolution.
Yep.
And
The Doctor.
And Peter Himmelman and Jeff Victor and Billy McLaughlin. Lots of folks.
I thought you weren't going to say any names. Are you just here to name drop now? Is that what's happening?
Well, I got to tell you, these guys are really good people, and I want to make sure they got a shout out.
They're all actually amazing people. But I'm very excited about this. It seems like the potential, like there's not really a ceiling on it. Like there are about 1,000 things you could do with a mobile studio, a high-end studio that produces quality content on the river. I mean, again, whether we're talking about culture, I mean, you can have national bands on there and it's going to be fun for people, but you could swing down to a town that no one's ever heard of, somewhere down in Missouri, and have a local choir on. I mean, there's not really a limit to what you could do with this sort of a mobile platform.
Well, in addition to having Brian Oak Floats series next summer.
I am available.
To your point, my wife and I showed up at the Reverend's Church down in Memphis, Al Green.
Yeah.
I called him ahead of time and said, we're coming down. He goes, what are you trying to do? He doesn't understand it at first.
Yeah.
So we went down and we went to church on a Sunday, and he knew I was coming because he goes, Minneapolis. Come on down here. And so I got shouted out, Minneapolis. And so we're sitting in church and we're watching him start to preach, and he's talking and he's getting fiery and he's starting to get heated and the words are coming out faster, and all of a sudden, he started into tune, and then the organ started and then we were off to the races.
Oh my God.
So he's got a youth program. He says, you know what? If you bring the boat, we'll put the youth on here. I'll bring the band.
Yeah.
So here we come, Al. Get ready.
Literally, the Reverend Al Green. Now, before we get to a little music that was originally by the Reverend Al Green, before we bid you a fond farewell, you do have to come back because we barely scratched the surface.
Yes.
There's a lot here. But I'm kind of excited about what you're doing with Unlocked Mission. Is there any point in people tracking you down online and finding out what you're up to now? Can they get in on the ground floor? Is there anything Patreon related or supporting related where they can help you and then be a part of what you create in the future?
UnlockedMission.com is the website, and that's got opportunities to do some giving opportunities. But, it's time, talent, and treasure. People want to put in some sweat equity. We've got the boat that is, coming along quite nicely. But
it looks great.
We want to prepare some other things to it to make it sure that it's even better, so that when you guys come on, you're going, okay, we're in a good place.
I loved it.
If I'm not mistaken, we're looking forward to being on that boat in the not too distant future. Is that right?
We're trying to work something out.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
For the community.
Yep, and that's the thing. We want to make sure the community has a chance to see something in a way that they've never experienced before.
I love it. And it sounds like at some point you're planning a major excursion that is not going to be a short-term event down the river and possibly back up the river. Before that happens, do you promise to come back so that we can really give a good look at what it is you're planning to do? Because I got to be honest. I mean, I had a vague idea of what we were talking about before you came in today. Now I'm actually kind of excited about what the possibilities are.
Cool.
I mean,
cool.
There's literally almost nothing you can't do on this mobile platform. It's really cool, man. Are you excited?
Yeah.
I know it's a ton of work, and I know that it's expensive, and I know life is not simple, and it can sometimes be easy for someone like me to get excited about it when you're like, yeah, I've been working on this shit for 10 years, Oak. Thanks. All right. But it's cool, man. I've not heard of anything like this before.
We are the one and only in the world that moves. So the fact is that we want people to get excited about it. We want people to look into our website at unlockedmission.com. Facebook, same thing, Unlocked Mission. And take it to the river, drop it in the water.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to say goodbye. Thanks again to all of our sponsors. Smart Start MN, thanks to Palmer's Bar. You can find them at palmersbar.net. Do not forget, in just a couple of short days, we are going to be there helping with the kickoff weekend of Oktoberfest at Forgotten Star Brewing. Sean Bernard, apparently he sells and buys homes. Is that right?
I do indeed.
Yeah?
Yeah, reach out. I've known Peter since 1990. We were talking about that for 31 years. Love this guy like a brother. What I mean by that is we both love each other. We have a hell of a time, but there's been a few times where he's probably wanted to strangle me.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit the other way too. But we always come through. He's just a fantastic guy with a big heart, and thanks so much for all your work on this. I can't wait to see how this thing rolls for you.
My pleasure.
And we're going to wait for a little while to do an all-radio edition, since we've all been through the grinder in roughly the same era, because we call that as mutually assured destruction. There are certain stories that we're not allowed to tell, but if we start telling them, we're telling all of them. So we'll do that next time. Right now, don't forget unlockedmission.com to find out more about the Joyful Noise, a boat that I know we're going to hear a ton about moving forward. It's a really exciting opportunity, and I appreciate you telling the story, Peter.
Yeah, you got it. My pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot.
We'll talk to you again once again soon. And this time, so not only the Reverend Al Green does a great job. The Talking Heads probably brought this song to more people who had never even heard of Al Green than he might have expected. But here, you go back to, we talked about our wives being educators. My wife's name is Irish start to finish. She's as Irish gets. So I've seen this movie no less than 20 times. Why did you go with this version of this song?
Well, you know what? It's kind of in my education. I knew Talking Heads version first. I didn't know Al Green's version. I didn't get the research. I thought, well, it's an original by the Talking Heads. And then all of a sudden this movie hits. And I'm like, okay, there's more to this. And that prompted me to dig back and find out. But the real reason I like this version is the snare.